Freedom, Memoirs 1954 to 2021 by Angela Merkel. Read by Juliet Stevenson. Prologue. This book tells a story that will not happen again, because the state I lived in for 35 years ceased to exist in 1990. If it had been offered to a publishing house as a work of fiction, it would have been turned down, someone said to me early in 2022, a few weeks after I stepped down from the office of Federal Chancellor. He was familiar with such issues and was glad that I had decided to write this book precisely because of its story. A story that is as unlikely as it is real. It became clear to me, telling this story, drawing out its lines, finding the thread running through it, identifying leitmotifs, could also be important for the future. For a long time, I couldn't imagine writing such a book. That first changed in 2015, at least a little. Back then, in the night between September the 4th and 5th, I had decided not to turn away the refugees coming from Hungary at the German-Austrian border. I experienced that decision, and above all its consequences, as a caesura in my chancellorship. There was a before and an after. That was when I undertook to describe, one day when I was no longer chancellor, the sequence of events, the reasons for my decision, my understanding of Europe and globalization bound up with it, in a form that only a book would make possible. I didn't want to leave the further description and interpretation just to other people. But I was still in office. The 2017 Bundestag election followed, along with my fourth period of office. In its last 2 years, the containment of the COVID-19 pandemic was the predominant theme. The pandemic, as I said publicly on several occasions, made huge demands on democracy on a national, European, and global level. This also prompted me to broaden my outlook and not only write about refugee policy. If I was going to do it at all, I had to do it properly, I said to myself, and if I was, then I would do it with Beate Baumann. She has been advising me since 1992. And is an eyewitness. I stepped down from office on December the 8th, 2021. After 16 years, I left it, as I said at the Bundeswehr's military tattoo in my honor a few days before, with joy in my heart. By the end, I had in fact longed for that moment. Enough was enough. Now it was time to take a break and rest for a few months. Leave the frantic world of politics behind me, to begin a new life in the spring, slowly and tentatively, still a public life, but not an active political one. Find the right rhythm for public appearances, and write this book. That was the plan. Then came February the 24th, 2022, Russia's attack on Ukraine. It was immediately clear that writing this book as if nothing had happened was completely out of the question. The war in Yugoslavia at the beginning of the 1990s had already shaken Europe to its core. But the Russian attack on Ukraine was a greater threat. It was a breach of international law that shattered the European peace which had prevailed since the Second World War, and was based on the preservation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of its states. Profound disillusionment followed. I will write about that, too. But this is not a book about Russia and Ukraine. That would be a different book. Instead, I would like to write the story of my 2 lives. The first up to 1990 in a dictatorship, and the second since 1990 in a democracy. At the moment when the first readers hold this book in their hands, the 2 halves are of more or less equal length. But in fact, of course, these are not 2 lives. In fact, they are 1 life, and the second part cannot be
Sample complete. Ready to continue?